brought their historic conflicts to the shores of North America in 1690 in colonial Canada, there was an admiral by the name of William Phips. He was a commander of the British fleet, and he was ordered to anchor outside Quebec City on the St. Lawrence River. He arrived there before the British infantry, and once they all arrived, the battle was to begin. But he got there early. He was something of an ardent nonconformist. And while he was waiting in his boredom and who knows what else, he looked up and was annoyed by the statues of the saints on the bulwarks and the towers and the walls of the local cathedral. So he took command of the ship's guns and began to pick off. We don't know, and there's no record of how many statues he hit. But when the British infantry arrived and the signal was given for the battle to begin, Admiral Phips was out of ammunition. He used it all up shooting at the saints. There's a correlation to the message here today. But before we get there, I'm going to put you on the other side. Think about Noah in the Old Testament. He was the recipient of a lot of that kind of harsh criticism. Can you imagine what he faced when he was carrying out what God's purpose was for him and how much criticism was aimed towards him? Well, there's a few things that Noah might have learned along the way. First, plan ahead. It wasn't raining when he started building the ark. Second, this is my favorite, stay fit. Who knows? When you are 600 years old, someone might come and ask you to do something really important. Don't listen to critics. Do what has to be done. Remember, we're all in one boat. And then lastly, remember that sometimes the woodpeckers inside the boat are a greater threat than the storms outside. Mark frames a time in Jesus' life today for us in which he faced some of his harshest criticism. And of all places, it's in his hometown of Nazareth. In these weeks, in this time of the church year, we've been given the book of Mark, and we're kind of just going through these weeks sequentially. Last week, we heard this beautiful story of the healing of the woman who had been ill for 12 years and spent everything she had on doctors, and about the healing of the 12-year-old girl brought back to life. Mark is very careful. He's very sparse with words. When you've read the other Gospels, you know he's the shortest. Things happen short, tight, immediately. He's very clear with his words. And how he frames this situation today when Jesus goes home, I think, tells us something. You have the healings that we heard about last week, right before we started today's passage. And then right after this segment in Nazareth, he sends his followers and his friends out, and they begin to do the same kinds of things that he's done in the world. So that kind of frames what's going on. And I think there are just two brief phrases I will point you to in the reading today, which kind of unpack the rest of the message. And that is, the first is, here he is in Nazareth, and it said, they took offense at him. With the result, and the second phrase is, that he could do no deed of power there. But I love the throwaway line that Mark gives you, because he says, as soon as he says he could do no deed of power, except a few people were healed. This isn't a bad day for Jesus. He's not having an off day that a few people were healed and the rest weren't. This is a whole different scenario that Mark is describing, and he's very clear about that. It's not in Jesus that which has changed. It's what's going on in the hearts of the people. He's so clear in how he frames that there's something wrong in their perception. Scripture teaches us Jesus Christ, the same, yesterday, today, and forever. It's about orientation. N.T. Wright, Bishop Tom Wright of the Church of England, known to many of you for his wonderful and prolific writing, years ago served as college chaplain at Worcester College at Oxford. And part of his duties each year was to welcome the first-year students, the undergrads, as they came in. And he really enjoyed that. He found that most of the students enjoyed it. They were happy to meet him. But there were a few every year which would admit, sometimes sheepishly, sometimes with a bit of embarrassment, maybe sometimes a little bit bolder, would say, well, you won't be seeing much of me around here. You see, I don't believe in God. To which Wright would always reply, he developed kind of a stock answer. That's interesting. Which God is it that you don't believe in? The students were taken aback sometimes by his response. They stammered. They were a bit embarrassed. They didn't know quite how to respond. So they'd mutter out usually a few sentences about, well, I don't believe in a God that looks disapprovingly from up on high down on here and intervenes every once in a while with a miracle or two. Sends people he likes and loves to heaven and sends the rest to hell. And I love Wright's term for this. He called that spy in the sky theology. He developed another stock response to that. And he'd say, I don't believe in that God either. He'd get some quizzical looks, some intrigue. The rumor and the reputation of the other college chaplains at Oxford at that time is that many were atheists. He got these intriguing looks, but he would answer them squarely and clearly. He said, I believe in the God that is revealed in Jesus Christ of Nazareth. So here we are in Nazareth today. And it's really not that different then from the students that Wright was interacting with at Oxford. Probably from a lot of people here in the valley, people that meet every day, maybe some folks here. You're not quite sure how to orient to this God. And one of the things Jesus cautions about in his teaching that seems evident often is that people like that sense that God's just looking down from above. Jesus said, I'm a different kind of teacher. He said, your teachers lord it over you. They place heavy burdens on you. And the point of this message is not to put any burden on you. It can sound, when we're dealing with these passages of Mark, it's easy to twist it just a bit and sound like, well, if you're not seeing the miracles, if you're not seeing the power, there's probably something wrong with your faith. You hear those kinds of messages at times. But Jesus is not admonishing here. In response to what happens, it says he's amazed that only a few deeds of power can be done here. The only other place Jesus uses that word amazement in our scriptures is in reference to the centurion. It's a story you may know well. The centurion whose servant is ill. He calls for Jesus. He says, you can speak the word from far away, and my servant will be healed. Jesus says he's amazed he has not seen such faith. But there's something key in that, from far away. Here's this earthly centurion. He gets power, he gets authority, because that's one of the questions raised about Jesus, is what's your source for this? Who are you? What's going on? We know you. We've got you figured out, his hometown folks say. They know him near. And perhaps the advantage of this centurion is that he knows him far away. He wasn't raised with faith. He has no baggage. He's not looking down. He doesn't have this all packaged and figured out and set in clear paradigms. But he says, from far away, you can do this. God, I asked through the prophet Jeremiah, am I only a God nearby? Am I not a God far off? Am I only nearby? Jeremiah 23:23, he goes on in verse 24 to say, do I not fill the heavens and the earth? And that's what I want to unpack with you just a little bit. The core of the message today is just an and. Because the orientation of so many different perspectives can find themselves in what Jesus is unpacking here and what Mark is pointing to. He's not just the God far away, he is nearby, but there's got to be a connection, and so often there's a disconnection. A teacher I respect so much says, many of us build our theology around our disappointments. Real, gritty life, everyday life, where we live our life. You don't think of that as how you've built your theology. It may not be sky pie in the sky theology, but there may be some relevance, that there's some gap. Which God have you met? Are you relating to? And Jesus challenges for more. In my work as a priest over the last 10 years, I've often heard folks come to me, faithful people, at church every Sunday, and they'll start their sentences with things just like Right Her, but of a different variety. They'll say things like, well, I'm not the spiritual one. That's my wife. Or, I'm not, or I'm just, or somehow they disqualify their place in the world. They say, well, I'm not a spiritual, I'm a doctor, or I'm a speaker, I'm somewhere this or that. And that's the kind of things that we're hearing echoed of Jesus today that Mark records for us. They looked at Jesus and said, oh, he's just a carpenter. We know him. But I will tell you that if we lose something of who Jesus Christ is, as revealed in the flesh, Jesus of Nazareth, we lose something of our own future and our own hope. Really, in essence, we lose some of our own identity. We can't lose one without the other. What's your orientation? It's worth considering. Jesus challenged Peter to consider that on the night before his death. Peter is getting somehow that Jesus is above and beyond. But he's still disconnected. He's not got the and. He's very aware of what's nearby in his life. He's aware of his own unworthiness. That comes out a lot through the early part of Peter's life. But here Jesus challenges him. Jesus is about to go from the high place to the low place. And when he takes that low place beside Peter, Peter says, no. And Jesus said, unless I wash you, you have no part of me. I have to be high above and I have to be close. I love how the patristic fathers and the historic church recognized the fullness. And this is all the early church heresies had to grapple with some aspect. They either lost part of Jesus' humanity or his divinity. And what's always at stake is something for us. And they taught things like, that which he doesn't assume, he cannot heal. He has to meet us right where we are, high above and near. We need both sides, but we need to be recognized. He wants to lift us up. He doesn't just come to us high, he comes to us near. Jesus Christ became a son of man that we might become sons and daughters of God. There's a story told during the Civil War of a soldier who in very tragic circumstances lost two of his brothers, his only brothers, in battle. He requested an exemption from service, a release, and actually petitioned for an audience with President Lincoln. He was granted a release, went to the White House, showed up, got to the gate, and was summarily turned away. Pretty dejected and down about his circumstances, he just walked to a local park, and he was sitting there on a bench when a boy came up to him. And the boy could see that he was very sad and discouraged, and he just asked him what was going on. And the soldier shared his circumstances. And the boy listened, and then said, come with me. They walked back to the White House. But to the surprise of the soldier, this time they went right past the gate. They went up to the White House, they walked in. As they began to walk the halls, the soldier began to notice that the high-ranking officials, military officials, government officials, they stood to attention as they walked down the hall. The soldier was amazed. They get to the door of the Oval Office, and the boy doesn't hesitate. He pushes right in without a knock. There's President Abraham Lincoln and the Secretary of State poring over battle plans and strategies. And President Lincoln looks up and he says, yes, Todd? What can I do for you? He says, son. He said, Father, this soldier needs your help. He had access to his son. That's a portrait of our life of faith. It's what it's about. The people of Nazareth, they could only say, Jesus, son of Mary. They'd recognize Jesus in his humanity. but not even fullness. In the fullness of that, because to really recognize Him is to recognize that He takes on everything to come near and bear what we bear, so that we can live a different kind of life. We are not meant. We're meant to live an and life. Never start a statement with just or only or I am this. Wherever you go, you're not just a student. You're not just a doctor. Even if you're retired, back to no. There's no just. It's all yours. And our inheritance is to bring the power and the wisdom, the authority, the love of God wherever we are. That's what is ours by right. That's the full and statement that this passage points to. As we close, I love how C.S. Lewis wrote about this in Mere Christianity. He recognized something I think we all need to recognize, because there's always this fear of what we're going to lose, or when we're trying to make that and connection, it's like somehow we get lost, but we don't. We have, just like Jesus was Son of Mary and Son of God, we've got practical, ordinary things, but they connect. They're not disconnected. We need the and in our life that connects us in practical application, always, to our spiritual inheritance and just what we do in everyday life. And Lewis wrote, "It is only the Christians who have any idea of how human souls can be taken into the life of God and yet remain themselves, in fact, be very much more themselves than they were before." You are meant to touch the ordinariness of life with the extraordinariness of heaven. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand as we confess our faith and hope.